All right, so you want to get a handle on the real challenges of companies going global, right? You sent over a really interesting mix of articles and research on this. And well, today we're going to unpack all that. We'll pull out the most important bits, and hopefully by the end, you'll feel like a seasoned expert in this complex world. And trust me, there's some really fascinating stuff in here. Like, did you know that something as basic as infrastructure can make or break a company's success in developing countries? We'll even dive into how these initiatives, like the African Continental Free Trade Area, are trying to change the game. Plus, we'll look at those cultural blunders, the ones that can trip up even the biggest companies. We'll even dissect some real world case studies, the good, the bad, the ugly, see what lessons we can all learn. Now, the appeal of global expansion, totally get it, more revenue, diverse markets, you get a competitive edge. But the articles you shared, they don't sugarcoat it. It's a tough road. So let's kick things off with maybe the economic hurdles.
Yeah, yeah. That's where it gets real, right? I think one of the first things companies got to wrap their heads around is trade competition and market access. It's not a level playing field,
Hmm.
especially for developing countries. I mean, think about it. Inefficient transportation systems, you got your convoluted regulations. It's a jungle out there. Major roadblocks, especially for businesses trying to get into global trade. And what's even more interesting is that increased trade doesn't mean everyone wins. Some sectors might boom, sure, but others, they face job losses, economic hardship even. It's kind of like you were saying, you need to look at it from all sides, multiple perspectives.
Yeah, that really resonated with me in these articles too, like how crucial infrastructure is. I was honestly surprised to see how something we take for granted, like decent roads, good ports, can have such a massive impact, can really make or break a country's ability to thrive in global trade. Tell me more about that.
It is fascinating, isn't it? There's this one article that cited a World Bank study, found that a 10% improvement in transportation infrastructure, well, that could lead to a 3–4% increase in a developing country's exports. That's enormous. Imagine a country like Nigeria. If they could just move goods more efficiently, from farms to the ports, their agricultural exports would skyrocket. But it's not just roads and ports either. Inadequate logistics, those complex customs procedures, it all creates bottlenecks, slows down trade, increases costs. And then you got the digital divide too. Limited access to reliable internet, financial services, it all holds businesses back, especially in developing countries.
Yeah, it's all connected, isn't it? Speaking of connections, you mentioned the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Yeah,
Sounds like they're really trying to connect things, make trade more efficient across the whole continent. What's the long game there? What are they hoping to achieve?
it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
Ambitious, definitely, but potentially a game changer. The goal is basically to create a single market, one for goods and services across all of Africa. Reduce trade barriers, boost trade within Africa itself. Think of it as a massive infrastructure upgrade. Better roads, smoother border crossings, streamlined regulations. It's a long-term project, sure, but if they pull it off, it could totally transform things. Increase trade within Africa, attract foreign investment, and ultimately, hopefully, lift millions out of poverty.
It's great to see those kind of efforts,
Right.
addressing those root causes of economic inequality. But even with better infrastructure, you can't escape those currency exchange rates. No business can when going global. And the articles you shared, they really hammered home how unpredictable they can be.
Oh, absolutely. Those currency fluctuations, they can make or break a company's bottom line,
Hmm.
especially the smaller ones, those with limited resources. There was one article that highlighted a US-based software company saw a 15% decrease in profits just in one quarter, all because the euro suddenly dropped. Imagine trying to budget when your revenue is on a roller coaster like that, totally outside of your control.
Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in. So, what can companies do to protect themselves? What strategies are those successful global companies using to mitigate those risks?
Well, there are some tried and true methods. Hedging's one of them. It's kind of like insurance for your currency exposure. You'd use financial instruments like forward contracts, options to basically lock in those exchange rates. Protect yourself from those unexpected swings. Another strategy is diversification, spreading your operations across different countries. That way, you're generating revenue in multiple currencies, less vulnerable to the ups and downs of just one. Think of it like a diversified investment portfolio. Spreads the risk.
So, it's a mix of smart financial tools and strategic planning. And of course, we got to talk about the big one, political stability. The articles had some real horror stories, companies getting caught in political turmoil facing unpredictable regulations.
Yeah, that's a huge factor, especially for long-term investments. One article, I think, mentioned a mining company that invested heavily in a South American country. Things were going great until, boom, Sudden change in government, their assets nationalized, poof, years of profit wiped out. The company was reeling. That's why it's absolutely crucial to really assess the political climate before you even think about entering a new market. Look at the government. How stable is it? How much corruption is there? Any history of unrest? It's all about managing risk, making informed decisions.
We've covered a lot already. Economic challenges, infrastructure, those currency fluctuations, political stability. But there's another layer we got to unpack, the cultural dimension. And I have
Yep.
a feeling this is where things get really interesting.
Oh, you bet. It's surprising how often companies just completely underestimate the impact of cultural differences. There was this one article shared this kind of funny but totally cringeworthy anecdote of an American fast food chain. They launched a big marketing campaign in China. Same slogans, same imagery that worked great in the US, let's just say. It didn't translate well. Major backlash.
Oh, I can only imagine. You'd think in this day and age, companies would be more aware of those cultural nuances. But I guess those blunders still happen. So where do you even begin to tackle that challenge? What are the key areas they need to focus on?
Well, I think one of the most obvious but often overlooked is language. Even subtle differences can lead to, misunderstandings, misinterpretations. You can even end up offending customers. I remember reading about a tech company that launched a product in Spain, great product, except the name. Well, unbeknownst to them, it had this rather unfortunate slang meaning. They had to pull the whole thing, rebrand it, cost them a fortune.
Ouch. Yeah. I can see how those kinds of mistakes can be costly, not just financially, but yeah, damage to your reputation for sure. Makes you realize how important it is to really do your research, have that local expertise on your team. But language is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's a whole deeper level of cultural understanding that companies need to figure out.
Absolutely. It's about understanding those unspoken rules, the values, the beliefs, the customs. All those things shape how people interact, how they do business. Different in every culture.
Yeah.
Like in some cultures, direct eye contact, that's respect.
Mm.
But in others, that's aggressive, confrontational even. You got to be mindful of those differences and adapt your communication style. Understanding those cultural norms around gift giving, business attire, even humor can be crucial.
So cultural competence, it's more than just knowing facts about a culture, right? It's about being able to apply that knowledge in a way that builds trust, builds rapport.
Exactly. It's those genuine connections, those go way beyond just a transaction. That's where empathy comes in, active listening, being genuinely curious about other cultures, asking questions, being open to learning new perspectives.
It's realizing that cultural diversity isn't just a nice to have, it's a must have for businesses.
I couldn't agree more. Companies that can really navigate those cultural differences, they've got an edge, they build stronger relationships, they avoid those costly mistakes, and they create products and services that resonate with a much wider audience.
So we've got economic challenges, political considerations, and now this cultural dimension. Lot to juggle. But those articles you sent, they also highlighted the legal and regulatory hurdles companies face. Going global, it's like stepping into a legal minefield, right? Each country with its own unique set of laws.
Oh, absolutely. That's where things can get really tricky. And the stakes are high. Non-compliance, you're talking
Yeah.
hefty fines, legal battles. You can even wreck your brand's reputation.
So let's talk about regulatory compliance. What are those key areas companies need to focus on, just to make sure they're playing by the rules in every market they enter?
One of the toughest things is simply keeping up. Laws and regulations, they're constantly changing. What flies in one country could be a total no-go in another. Take data privacy, for instance, the European Union. Way stricter data protection laws than the U.S. companies operating in both. Got to play by both sets of rules.
Yeah, I'm starting to see why a strong legal team is essential. But it's not just about avoiding penalties, right? It's also about protecting your own intellectual property, especially when operating in different countries.
Absolutely. Huge concern, especially for companies with valuable patents, trademarks, copyrights, you name it. The rules around IP protection, they're all over the map, different in every country. You got to make sure your IP is registered, protected everywhere you operate.
Otherwise, someone could just copy your hard work. I remember reading about a fashion company. They lost millions. Millions. Just because they didn't protect their designs in a key Asian market.
It's a classic example, right? Neglect IP protection, and the consequences can be devastating. And it's not just about registering it either. It's understanding how it's enforced locally. Those nuances matter.
So one size doesn't fit all. You need a tailored strategy for each market. Take into account the legal framework and the cultural norms.
You got it. That's where having that local expertise is so valuable. Lawyers who know the ins and outs of the local system, they can guide you, make sure your IP is protected.
Makes sense. So we've talked about regulatory compliance, IP protection. But what about navigating employment law when you're hiring people in foreign countries?
Another minefield. Employment laws are all over the place, different in every country. Minimum wage, working hours, contracts, benefits, termination procedures, you name it. And if you don't comply, legal disputes, fines, your company's reputation takes a hit. It's serious stuff.
It's a good reminder that global expansion isn't just about navigating different markets. It's about different legal systems, different cultural expectations around work, the whole nine yards.
Totally. And it really highlights how important a strong HR function is. One that understands those nuances of international employment law, that can make sure your company is operating ethically, legally in every market.
Doing business the right way, even when it gets complicated. You mentioned a term earlier I wanted to dig into, a bit more: compliance localization. What exactly does that mean? How does it go beyond just checking those boxes, meeting the bare minimum requirements?
It's about a more holistic approach, I'd say. Going beyond just ticking the boxes, really integrating those business practices with the local culture and regulations. Understanding the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law.
Got it. So can you give me like a real world example how a company might actually do that?
Sure. Let's say you're a tech company and you're launching a new social media platform. Let's say in a country with strict privacy laws. Compliance localization wouldn't just be about following those specific legal requirements on data protection. It'd be about thinking about how you design the whole platform. The user interface, your marketing messages, even how your customer service interacts with users. All reflecting those local cultural values around privacy and data security. It's about showing a genuine commitment, you know, respecting those local norms, building trust with those users.
It sounds like compliance localization, it's as much about cultural sensitivity as it is about legal expertise. Creating that seamless experience for users that feels authentic, respectful of their values.
Exactly. It's about going beyond compliance as just a checklist. It's about seeing it as a chance to build a stronger, more sustainable business.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Economic hurdles, political risks, that whole cultural dimension, the legal maze of global expansion. It's a lot. Even with the best intentions, things can go wrong. But I'm curious about the operational side. Even with perfect planning, I imagine things pop up, unexpected hurdles when you're trying to run a business across borders.
Oh, absolutely. Operational challenges, those are often the hardest to predict and manage. Let's start with what we might call internal operational risks. These are kind of like inefficiencies, breakdowns can happen within a company's own operations. And they get amplified when you're operating in foreign markets.
Okay, internal operational risks. What would be some examples of that?
Well, think about it. You got different time zones, different languages, different cultural norms around, communication and decision making. Those differences can create friction, slow things down, especially in areas like sales, marketing, logistics, and finance.
Yeah, I bet those communication breakdowns are a major headache. One of the articles mentioned having clear communication protocols, invested in language training.
Absolutely. And it's not just about speaking the language. It's about understanding those nuances in communication styles. In some cultures, people are very direct, while in others, communication is more indirect, nuanced. Misinterpreting those cues leads to misunderstandings, even conflict.
It's a good reminder that cultural competence isn't just for, like, your sales and marketing teams, it's for internal operations too.
Exactly. And that's where strong leadership really comes in. Leaders set the tone. They got to foster a culture of open communication, respect for diversity, and that willingness to learn from each other.
Creating an environment where people feel comfortable asking questions, sharing their perspective, working together across borders. But beyond communication, what other internal operational risks should companies watch out for?
One of the biggest: lack of coordination, lack of alignment between headquarters and those overseas operations. Decisions made back at HQ. They might not be the best fit for the local market. Maybe there's not enough communication about goals, priorities, strategies.
Like a game of telephone, right? The message gets distorted as it travels across all those borders. One article highlighted the importance of clear reporting structures, regular communication channels, even cross-functional teams, those that work together across different locations.
All excellent strategies. It's also crucial to have strong local leadership. People who really get the market, the culture, who can make those decisions in the best interest of the business.
So it's all about striking that balance between centralized control and local autonomy.
Exactly. You want to keep things consistent, aligned across all your global operations, but got to empower those local teams to make decisions too. ones that are responsive to the unique challenges, the unique opportunities in their markets.
Makes sense. But internal operational risks are only part of the equation, right? You also have to manage those compliance risks. Operating in all those different legal and regulatory environments, yikes.
Oh, absolutely. Compliance is a massive challenge. Regulations around things like labor laws, environmental protection, data privacy, anti-bribery, it's a different world in every country. And if you don't comply, consequences can be severe. You're talking fines, lawsuits, damage to your brand, even criminal charges in some cases.
That's high stakes. One of the articles I read stressed having a really solid compliance program with clear policies, procedures, and training for employees.
Essential. You also got to have a really strong risk assessment process in place. Identify potential compliance risks. Develop strategies to mitigate those risks. Be proactive.
Anticipate those problems, put safeguards in place, prevent those problems before they even happen, or at least minimize the impact.
Exactly, and always have a plan B. A plan C even, just in case things don't go as planned.
Always good to be prepared. So what are some of the major risks companies need to be ready for when they go global?
Well, one of the biggest is political risk. That could be anything from changes in government policies, political instability, social unrest, even war.
Those are some scary scenarios. I remember reading about a company that had to evacuate all their employees from a country. Civil unrest just erupted out of nowhere.
It happens, and it's important to have those contingency plans in place. Evacuation procedures, insurance coverage, even alternative supply chains. You never know.
Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Exactly. Another major risk is economic volatility. Currency fluctuations, inflation, recessions, even changes in global trade patterns.
We talked about how those currency fluctuations can impact a company's bottom line earlier.
Right? And economic downturns. They can lead to decreased demand, supply chain disruptions, even difficulty getting financing.
So how can companies mitigate those risks?
Well, one strategy is diversification, operating in multiple countries. That way you're less exposed to the economic ups and downs of any single market.
Spread the risk, smart.
Exactly. You can also use financial tools like hedging to protect yourself from those currency fluctuations.
So it's a combo, strategic planning and smart financial management.
Absolutely. Now, another important risk to consider is regulatory risk. Changes in laws, regulations, government policies, even corruption.
We talked about how important compliance is, understanding that local legal framework.
Right. And staying informed. Any proposed changes in laws that might affect your business. You got to stay on top of that. Might mean working with local lawyers, consultants, industry associations, whatever it takes to stay up to date.
Stay vigilant, be adaptable.
Exactly. And build those relationships with government officials, regulators. Those relationships can be invaluable, help you navigate the regulatory landscape, advocate for your business interests.
It seems like relationship building is key in global expansion. Building trust, collaborating with partners, suppliers, government officials, even your own employees.
You got it. Relationships are the foundation of success in global business. Without them, you're building on sand.
We've talked about partnerships, market entry strategies, risk management, but what about market research? Those articles you sent really highlighted how important it is to understand the local market before making any big moves.
Oh, absolutely. Market research, that's essential. You're gathering information about your target market, the competition, consumer behavior, cultural norms, even the political and economic climate.
So do your homework before you jump in.
Exactly. Market research can help you find opportunities, avoid those potential pitfalls, and tailor everything. Your products, your services, your marketing messages, make them a perfect fit for that local market.
What are some of the things companies should be focusing on when they do their market research, especially for global expansion?
Well, I think one of the keys is understanding your target market. Who are those potential customers? What are their demographics? What do they want and need? How do they buy things? What are their cultural preferences?
Really getting to know those customers on a deeper level.
Exactly. You also want to understand the competitive landscape. Who are you up against in this new market? What are they doing well? Where are they weak? How can you differentiate yourself? What makes you unique?
Understand your place in the market, how you can stand out from the crowd.
Exactly. And then you got to research that local business environment. That's crucial.
What do you mean by local business environment specifically?
I'm talking about the regulatory framework, the tax system, the infrastructure, the availability of skilled labor, even those cultural norms around doing business. You got to know what you're walking into.
Understanding the context, the big picture.
Exactly. And then you need to assess the political and economic climate. Is the country politically stable? Is the economy growing? Are there any potential risks on the horizon? You've got to do your due diligence.
So it's a pretty comprehensive undertaking, right? Market research, covering everything from consumer behavior to political analysis? Wow.
It can be, but it's an essential investment for any company that's serious about succeeding globally. You wouldn't build a house without blueprints, would you?
We've covered the importance of partnerships, market entry strategies, risk management, all that market research. But all this information, it needs to be woven together, right? Into a comprehensive market entry plan.
Absolutely. A good market entry plan, that's your roadmap. It guides your global expansion journey every step of the way.
So what are the key ingredients of a really great market entry plan?
Well, first you got to define your goals. What are you trying to achieve by expanding into this new market?
Increased revenue,
Yeah,
building brand awareness, maybe access to new talent.
could be any of those or a combination. Once you've figured out your goals, you got to develop a strategy to achieve them. That's where you lay out your market entry strategy, your marketing and sales plan, your operational plan, those financial projections, the whole shebang.
Makes sense. And I imagine you also need to figure out who your target customers are. Really nail down that value proposition, what makes you stand out to them.
You got it. It's about tailoring your message, your offerings to that specific market. And don't forget about pricing strategy.
Yeah, how do you even determine the right price for your products or services in a new market? That seems tricky.
It is.
Hmm.
Got to factor in your costs, of course, but also the competitive landscape, local purchasing power, even cultural perceptions of value. It's complicated.
So it's not just about crunching numbers, right? It's about understanding the nuances of that local market.
You got it. And you got to think about your distribution channels. How are you going to get your products, your services to those customers in the new market? Will you sell directly? You're right. Price and distribution, got to figure all that out. Often, companies need to adapt, see what works in the local market. Now, marketing and sales, we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
Got to think about how you're going to reach those customers, generate those leads, and ultimately drive those sales.
Time to get creative, right? Craft those messages that really connect with your audience. Figure out the best way to get to them.
Exactly. And again, cultural sensitivity, super important here.
Yeah.
What works in one market might totally bomb in another. One of the articles talked about this company made a pretty big mistake. They thought their ad campaign, it was funny, a big hit back home, so they figured it would translate well. Turns out, what they thought was lighthearted, well, it came across as offensive. Had to pull the whole campaign.
Oof, yeah, that's a PR nightmare for sure. Really shows how important it is to get those cultural nuances, especially when it comes to marketing. But how do you even navigate that? It's not like you can become an expert in every culture overnight, right?
You're right, you can't. And that's why it's crucial to have that local expertise on your team. Either hire local talent or partner with agencies that really know the market. They can help you craft those messages that resonate, choose the right media channels, and avoid those cultural landmines.
So have those people on the ground, those who can give you those insights, that guidance. But aside from cultural sensitivity, what else should companies keep in mind for marketing and sales?
Well, understanding the local media landscape is key. What are people watching, reading, listening to? Are they online? Traditional media, a mix of both. Got to figure that out.
Know where your audience is, meet them there.
Exactly. And then you got to think about your sales strategy. Direct sales force, network of distributors, online sales, maybe a mix.
Find the best way to reach those customers and then turn them into paying clients. That's the goal.
You got it. And one last thing, got to have a way to measure your results. How are you tracking your marketing ROI? What are your key performance indicators?
Which brings us to an important topic, measuring success. The articles you sent, they really emphasize this. Establishing clear metrics so you can see how things are going. Knowing if your global expansion efforts are actually paying off.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement of entering a new market, but you got to stay grounded. Have a way to assess whether that investment is actually delivering what you want it to.
So let's talk about KPIs, key performance indicators. What are some of the essential metrics that companies should be tracking?
Well, it depends on the company's goals, their objectives. But some common ones are market share, revenue growth, customer acquisition cost, customer lifetime value, brand awareness, and customer satisfaction.
Okay, let's break that down a bit. Market share, that's pretty straightforward, right? How much of the market do you control compared to your competitors?
Exactly. And revenue growth, well, that's just tracking how much your revenue is increasing in that new market.
And customer acquisition cost. That sounds like a big one, especially when you're just starting out in a new market trying to build that customer base.
It is. Customer acquisition cost, or FCAS, it measures how much you spend to get each new customer.
Yeah.
Really tells you how efficient your market and sales efforts are.
So lower CAC, that's a good thing, generally speaking.
Absolutely. Spending less to get each new customer, saying you're doing something right.
And what about customer lifetime value? What does that tell us?
Customer lifetime value, or CLTV, it's basically a prediction. How much revenue you expect to make from a customer over their entire relationship with your company.
So it's not just about that one-time sale, it's about building a relationship, keeping those customers happy.
You got it. And a high CLTV, well, that's a good sign. It means you're retaining those customers, keeping them coming back for more.
Makes sense. Brand awareness is another big one, right? Especially in a new market where you're trying to make a name for yourself. How do you even measure something like that? Seems kind of intangible.
Well, there are a few ways. You can do surveys, focus groups, get a sense of what people think about your brand. You can also look at things like website traffic, social media engagement, media mentions. See how visible you are in the market.
So it's a mix of hard data and more qualitative stuff, right? Feelings and perceptions. What about customer satisfaction? Seems pretty crucial for any business, but especially in a new market where you're trying to build that trust.
Absolutely. Customer satisfaction is all about how happy your customers are with your products, your services, their overall experience. Want them to love doing business with you.
Right. But how do you measure that?
Customer surveys, feedback forms, those are common ways. You can also look at customer reviews, social media sentiment, even the number of complaints you're getting. The fewer, the better, obviously.
Gather that feedback from everywhere. Get a complete picture of how satisfied your customers are.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, KPIs, they're not just about checking boxes. They're about finding ways to improve, see where you've fallen short, and fix it.
So if your customer acquisition cost is through the roof, maybe you need to tweak your marketing strategy or adjust your
Oh,
pricing.
exactly. Or if those customer satisfaction scores are tanking, maybe you need to step up your customer service or improve the quality of your products or services. It's all connected.
Use that data to make smart decisions, keep improving your operations.
You got it. Now, let's talk about ROI, return on investment, the big one.
ROI. The bottom line, that's what it all boils down to.
It is. ROI measures how profitable your global expansion efforts are. You calculate it by taking the net profit from your global operations, dividing that by the total investment you made.
So high ROI, that's a good thing, right? Means you're making money.
Exactly. But a low ROI might be a sign you need to change things up. Maybe even reconsider your investment in that market.
Got to make sure those global expansion efforts are actually creating value for your company.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, ROI isn't just about the money.
What do you mean by that?
Well, global expansion, it can have benefits you can't measure in dollars and cents, increased brand awareness, access to new talent, a more diverse workplace. Those things might not show up on your balance sheet, but they're still valuable.
So it's about the big picture, not just the financial bottom line.
You got it. Now I think it's time we talk about case studies. I always find those really helpful.
Me too. I love seeing real-world examples, the successes, the failures. It's all valuable. What are some of the interesting case studies you came across? Those that really highlight the challenges and opportunities of global expansion.
Where one that really stuck with me was about this global retail chain and their attempt to break into the Asian market. They had a successful business model, but they hit some serious roadblocks in Asia. Cultural differences, tough local competition, that whole complex regulatory environment.
They ran into pretty much everything we've been talking about, huh?
They did. But they didn't give up. They took a step back, reassessed their strategy, invested in market research to better understand the local consumers, the competition. And they partnered with local firms to get some insider knowledge, navigate those regulatory hurdles.
They were willing to adapt, learn from their mistakes.
Exactly. And they really focused on cultural sensitivity. Realized that their market and their store designs, it all needed to be tailored to the local culture. So they hired local employees to help bridge that cultural gap.
Smart move. It's a great example of how a company can turn things around, right? Be flexible, adaptable, and respectful of the local culture. Did they mention any specific changes they made that really moved the needle?
Well, one thing they did was change up their product offerings. Their standard stuff just wasn't resonating with Asian consumers. So they started offering more products that were tailored to local tastes.
So they adapted their products to meet the needs of the local market. What about their marketing? Did they change their approach there as well?
They did. They realized their marketing needed to be more culturally relevant. started using local celebrities in their ads, adapted their messaging to reflect those local values, what people aspired to.
So it's more than just translating your materials, right? It's about understanding the culture, adapting your message to resonate with that audience.
You got it. They even made changes to their store designs. Their original stores felt too impersonal, too sterile for Asian consumers. So they started incorporating more natural elements, wood, plants, things like that. They also made the stores more inviting, more social, with comfortable seating areas, even cafes.
So they created a more welcoming, culturally appropriate shopping experience.
Exactly. And all those changes paid off. Sales went up, brand awareness increased, and they were able to establish themselves in the Asian market.
It's inspiring, seeing how a company can overcome those challenges just by being willing to adapt, learn from those mistakes. What about the other case study?
Oh, right. That one was about a tech company trying to expand into Europe. They had a different set of challenges, great product, but they really struggled with that complex regulatory environment in Europe. Data privacy, that was a big one.
Yeah, data privacy is a huge issue in Europe, and it's only getting more complicated with all the new regulations.
It is. And this company, they underestimated how important compliance was. Tried to take that one-size-fits-all approach. Same data privacy policies they used everywhere else. Big mistake.
Didn't go over well, I imagine.
Nope. They ran into a ton of problems with regulators. Consumers got upset, worried about their privacy. The company had to scramble to fix things, realized they needed to be more proactive, so they invested heavily in building a solid compliance program.
So they had to change their whole mindset, right? From reactive to proactive.
Exactly. They hired local lawyers, consultants, to help them understand those European data privacy laws.
Yeah.
Developed new policies and procedures that met those requirements. They even did a whole training program for their employees so everyone understood how important data privacy was, how to comply with the rules.
So they took what could have been a total disaster and turned it into a win, built a stronger, more sustainable business because of it.
You got it. They also learned that transparency, communication, that's key, started being more open about their data privacy practices, showed they were serious about protecting customer data, really worked to build that trust.
It's a great example of how compliance can actually be a competitive advantage, right? They went above and beyond and it paid off. They differentiated themselves, built a stronger reputation with those consumers.
Absolutely. It shows that compliance, it's not just about avoiding legal trouble. It's about doing business the right way, ethically, responsibly.
Those case studies are great. They show how important it is to be adaptable, culturally sensitive, and committed to compliance, especially when you're expanding globally. But I have been thinking about something lately. How do you think AI, automation, all that will impact the challenges and opportunities of global expansion in the future?
Great question. AI and automation, they're already changing the game, and that impact's only going to get bigger.
Let's look into the crystal ball a bit. What are some scenarios we might see unfold as AI and automation become, more embedded in global business?
Well, one area with huge potential is language translation. As those AI-powered translation tools get better, more sophisticated, they could really break down those language barriers. Imagine you could communicate seamlessly with anyone, anywhere in the world, no matter what language they speak.
Wow, that would be incredible. Open up a whole new world of possibilities, right? Collaboration, innovation, reaching new markets, the sky's the limit. What about other areas where AI and automation could really make a difference?
Market research, for sure. AI-powered tools, they can crunch massive amounts of data. From social media, online reviews, government databases, everything. They can give you insights into consumer behavior, market trends, what the competition is doing.
So you could really get a deep understanding of your target market before you even make a move.
Exactly. And AI could also play a big role in talent acquisition. Imagine a platform that scans resumes and social media profiles from all over the world, finds the perfect candidates for any job, regardless of where they are.
So companies could tap into a global talent pool, find the best and brightest anywhere in the world.
Exactly. And AI could even help to streamline that onboarding process, give new employees personalized training and support, no matter where they are, what language they speak.
It sounds like AI and automation could really knock down a lot of those barriers companies face when they go global, make it easier to connect with customers, partners, employees all over the world.
Absolutely. And I think it'll spark even more innovation and growth. Companies will have more data, better tools, they'll be able to develop new products, new services. that meet the needs of a truly global marketplace.
It's an exciting time to be in business, that's for sure. But with all this talk about AI and automation, I think it's important to remember that human skills, those will always be important, especially in global business.
You're so right. We can't forget about cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence, building relationships across borders. Those are things AI can't replicate.
Exactly. You can't automate empathy, you can't automate cultural sensitivity.
Nope. And in fact, those skills will probably be even more valuable in a world where tech is taking over so many tasks. Companies that really thrive, they'll be the ones that blend human ingenuity with technological innovation.
So it's not about humans versus machines, right? It's about humans and machines working together, creating a more connected, more efficient, more prosperous global marketplace.
Exactly. Exciting times, and I can't wait to see how all this tech shapes the global landscape.
Me too. I think the companies that embrace these new technologies but also stay true to their values, their commitment to building those human connections, those are the ones that'll win in the long run.
I couldn't agree more.
So we've covered a ton in this deep dive. Economic, political challenges, the cultural complexities, the legal stuff, even the potential impact of AI and automation. I hope you're feeling more informed, more prepared to tackle your own global expansion goals.
It's been quite a journey. I'm excited to see what the future holds for global business.
Okay.
And I think those companies that embrace innovation, adaptability, and a human-centered approach, they'll be the ones that thrive.
Now, that's a great note to end on. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. How do you think the rise of remote work, virtual teams, will impact global expansion? What changes do you see on the horizon?
That's a great question to think about. It's definitely going to shake things up.
In what ways?
Well, for one, it could make expanding into new markets a lot easier. Companies might not need to invest as much in physical infrastructure. They could hire from anywhere, manage those teams virtually.
So we would see more decentralized, more agile approach to global expansion. Interesting.
Exactly. And I think it could lead to a more diverse, more inclusive workforce. Companies won't be limited by geography anymore when they're hiring talent.
That's exciting. But also comes with new challenges, right? Managing remote teams across time zones, different cultures, that can be tricky.
Absolutely. Companies will need to figure out new ways to communicate, collaborate, build those teams in a virtual world. And they can't forget about cultural differences. Those communication challenges can really trip you up if you're not careful.
It just shows that even as tech gets better, even as the world gets smaller, that human element of business, that's never going to go away.
Couldn't agree more.
This has been such a fascinating discussion. We've covered so much, and I feel like I've learned a ton.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you.
And I know our listeners feel the same way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing those boundaries. The world of global business, it's always evolving, and there's always something new to discover.
It's been a pleasure. It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Mm.
How remote work might change the whole global business landscape. But even with all that, companies still got to nail those fundamentals, the things we've been talking about. One of the articles you said, it had this really interesting case study, global retail chain, trying to expand into Asia.
Oh, yeah. That one stuck with me, too. Wasn't it a kind of cautionary tale about how important it is to really adapt to the local culture?
Exactly. On paper, this company had it all. Big brand, a business model that worked, products they thought would be a hit in Asia. But their launch, total flop. They basically took their marketing, their store designs, everything that worked elsewhere and just copied and pasted it. Figured it would be a slam dunk.
Ouch, yeah. Expensive mistake, I bet. Did the article say what went wrong exactly? Was it the pricing? Yeah. Or maybe they didn't find the right distribution channels.
It was the culture. They missed the mark big time. Their messaging, their visuals, even how their stores were laid out, it just didn't vibe with the local culture. They hadn't done their homework, didn't really understand those Asian consumers, and it showed.
It's crazy how often companies just kind of gloss over those cultural factors. I remember reading about this food company introduced a new product in a foreign market, but they totally forgot about the local customs around food preparation, serving sizes, the whole 9 yards. Turned into a logistical nightmare.
Happens all the time, unfortunately. But this retail chain, they were smart. They realized they messed up, and they fixed it. Invested in market research, figured out what those consumers actually wanted, what they liked. They even worked with local designers to make those store layouts more familiar, more welcoming to Asian shoppers.
So they went all in, huh? Really immersed themselves in the culture, created a more authentic brand experience. Anything specific they did that really made a difference? Any details that stand out?
One thing that stuck with me was their use of color. They learned that certain colors, well, they had completely different meanings in Asia compared to their Western markets. Just by adjusting their color palettes in the stores and their marketing, they were able to create a much more culturally sensitive aesthetic, much more appealing too.
It's wild how something as basic as color can be so powerful, culturally speaking. Really shows how important it is to do your research, have those local experts on your team. They can guide you.
Oh, absolutely. Can't emphasize that enough. Now, there was that other case study you included, the merger between those two multinational companies, one from Europe, one from North America. That one really highlighted those HR challenges that can pop up, especially when you have clashing corporate cultures.
Oh, that one. That was a doozy. I remember thinking, this is what happens when you try to jam two companies together, two completely different ways of doing things, and you don't have a plan to bridge that gap. Recipe for disaster.
Exactly. The article talked about how these two companies, on paper, it should have worked. They had complementary businesses, a solid strategy. But when it came to actually integrating their operations, their employees, yikes. Different management styles, communication norms, even how they made decisions, it was all different.
Talk about a culture clash. Did they manage to salvage it?
They did, but it took a lot of work. They realized they needed to build a new culture, one that respected the best of both worlds. So they invested in cross-cultural training, encouraged people to talk openly about those differences, created opportunities for employees from both sides to work together, learn from each other.
Sounds like they really made a conscious effort to blend those two cultures. What were some of the big takeaways from that whole experience?
Well, communication was huge. That leadership team, they had to be clear about their vision for the merged company, what values would guide them. They also realized that they had to be flexible, adaptable. There wasn't just one right way to do things. They had to find solutions that worked for everybody.
It shows that global expansion, it's not just about, expanding your business, your footprint. It's about expanding your mindset, being open to different perspectives, different ways of working.
Exactly. Those cultural differences, if you handle them right, they can actually make you stronger, more innovative even. It's about seeing that diversity as an asset.
Love that. So we've explored all these complexities of global expansion, economic, political, cultural, legal, the whole shebang. We've talked about the nitty-gritty, the operations, the strategies, even the future with AI and all that. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about the human side of global business. That's something I think is really important.
Absolutely. Even with all this tech, all these advancements, it still comes down to people. Building those genuine connections, understanding and respecting those cultural differences. That's what makes or breaks a business in the end.
Couldn't agree more. It's about remembering that business, at its core, is about people. Connecting with those customers, building relationships with your partners, creating a workplace where everyone feels valued, respected, no matter where they come from, what their background is.
Well said. And the companies that get that, the ones that put those human connections first, even as they embrace the new tech, those are the ones that are going to win.
That's a great message to leave our listeners with. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. I feel like I learned so much, and I hope everyone listening feels the same way.
It's been a pleasure. Always enjoy talking about this stuff.
And for those of you listening, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into the world of global business.